The night my dad said, "You'll regret it if you stay with her," I laughed in his face. I thought he was trying to scare me off Claire. I didn't know he was begging me to see what he already saw. I thought my life was solid. I was 31, working as a project manager in a mid-sized construction firm. Long hours, sure, but good pay and a sense of stability. Then there was Claire. We'd been together for just over a year, and she had this way of making me feel like life was moving forward. The warning came at dinner. Richard had invited us to his house, made his famous roast chicken, the kind of meal that always filled the place with garlic and thyme. I thought it was going to be one of those nights where he and Claire finally found common ground. Instead, halfway through the meal, he set his fork down, looked me dead in the eye and said, "You'll regret it if you stay." The room went quiet. Claire's fork paused mid-air, and she gave a small laugh, trying to brush it off. I felt heat rising in my neck. "Dad," I said, forcing a smile, "can we not do this tonight?" He didn't blink. "I'm telling you, son, you'll regret it." Claire set her fork down, her face pale. "Richard, that's not fair. I've done nothing but try to be part of this family." I shot him a look, trying to keep my voice even. "You don't have to like her, but you don't get to dictate my life. You're being controlling." For the first time I could remember, he looked at me not like a son but like a stranger making a mistake he couldn't stop. He didn't argue. He just went back to his plate, chewing slowly, the warning hanging in the air like smoke. On the drive home, Claire squeezed my hand. "He'll never respect us, Michael. He'll always see me as someone who doesn't deserve you." I shook my head. "He's stubborn. He lost Mom, and he's scared to lose me, too. He'll come around." But Claire leaned in closer, her voice low. "No, he won't. And you know what? We don't need him. We can build our own life without his approval." That was the first seed of distance she planted, and I didn't notice it at the time. A few weeks later, back at our place, she started insisting on small changes. Nothing dramatic, just practical things. "I'll handle the bills. You're always busy with work." Or, "Let me take over the rent payments. I'm better at organizing." It sounded thoughtful, like she wanted to take the weight off my shoulders. I told myself it was proof we were a team. But Dad noticed anyway. He didn't need to live with us. He could read me too well. I'd mention Claire handling the bills like it was nothing, and he'd just stare at me, frown, and say, "Be careful handing over the wheels, son." He always noticed. One afternoon, I stopped by his house to drop off some groceries. He was in the garage, tinkering with an old radio, hands steady even as his health was starting to show little cracks. More naps, slower steps. He didn't look up when he said, "You're letting her run things." I frowned. "She's just organized, Dad. It's not a big deal." He set down his screwdriver and met my eyes. "You think it's about bills? No, it's about control. Every inch you give, she'll take a mile." I laughed, but it came out too sharp. "Not everyone is out to get us, Dad. She's not Mom. She's not you. She's different." He sighed, a sound heavy with years of knowing when people were lying to themselves. "Different isn't always better." I waved him off, gave him a hug, and drove away. But the words stuck. Even when I crawled into bed beside Claire that night, even when she curled into me and whispered about the future, I heard his voice echoing. "You'll regret it if you stay." I told myself he was just being protective, maybe even threatened by losing his place in my life. I convinced myself I was torn between two kinds of love, one that raised me and one I was building. But deep down, I knew which voice had the weight of truth, and I chose to ignore it. Weeks later, it happened at the dinner table. Dad had invited us again, his way of smoothing over the rough edges after our last clash. Sarah, my younger sister, came too, cheerful as ever, trying to bridge the gap between her stubborn father and the girlfriend who never seemed to please him. The meal smelled like rosemary and butter, steam rising off the plates. For a moment, it almost felt normal. Then Richard's hand froze halfway to his glass. His eyes rolled back, and he slumped forward. "Dad!" I jumped up, my chair clattering to the floor. My heart hammered, but before I could even process, Claire was already dialing her phone, rattling off details to the emergency dispatcher like she'd trained for this moment. At the hospital, Richard came around groggy but alive. Doctors ran tests, spoke in their careful, half-reassuring tones. Claire never left his side, clipboard in hand, scribbling down everything they said. When one of them asked who would be the primary contact for updates, she stepped forward before I could answer. "That'll be me." I was too rattled to question it. I let her. Back at Dad's house, Claire unpacked a small organizer she'd bought from the pharmacy and spread his bottles of medication across the table. "He's been on the same routine for years," I muttered, watching her sort. "Exactly," she said. "And look where it got him. Don't worry, I'll manage this. You've got enough stress with work." She smiled like it was nothing. I told myself she was helping. Truth was, I was grateful. But Dad wasn't. The first night she handed him his pills, he squinted at the capsules, then at me. "These aren't mine." "They're the same," Claire replied smoothly. "Just the generic brand. Insurance covers them better. Less money out of pocket." Dad's frown lingered, but he swallowed it anyway. I pulled her aside later. "Why didn't you tell me about the switch?" She touched my arm. "Michael, you just panic. Let me handle it. Trust me." And I did. Over the next week, she threw herself into managing his recovery like it was her personal mission, scheduling appointments, fielding calls, and even ordering groceries for his house. I told Sarah it was impressive, that maybe Dad was finally seeing her worth. But Sarah's face tightened. She told me not to come over, said Dad needed peace and quiet. "That's not what she meant," I said quickly, defending her before I even thought. "She probably just doesn't want the house crowded while he's weak." Sarah stared at me, unconvinced. A few days later, Dad called me himself. His voice was thin, raspy. "Son, I don't like this. I don't know what she's giving me, but I feel off. Dad, the doctor signed off on the meds. Claire's just keeping track. You should be thanking her." Silence stretched. Then, low and deliberate, "I told you you'll regret it if you stay with her." He hung up before I could answer. I stood there, phone still in my hand, feeling a knot form in my chest. For the first time, his words didn't sound like stubborn pride. They sounded like a man trying to warn me from inside a trap. Still, I ignored it. I went back to Claire that night and thanked her for everything she was doing. She leaned against me, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "He's in good hands." But for the first time, I wasn't sure if she meant his or hers. The weeks that followed were a blur of hospital visits, pill bottles, and strained silences. Richard's collapse at dinner had shaken me, but I told myself Claire had it under control. She was organized, competent, calm under pressure. Everything I wasn't when emotions ran high. But as days turned into weeks, a gnawing unease crept in. Richard wasn't bouncing back. He looked thinner, his hands trembling more with each visit. His sharp eyes, the ones that used to catch me sneaking out as a teenager, seemed dulled, unfocused. Even his voice carried a slur sometimes, as though his tongue had forgotten its rhythm. One afternoon, Dr. Patel pulled me aside after an appointment. His tone was low, cautious. "Michael, your father's decline is unusual. The dosage and type of medication he's receiving don't quite match his chart history. Did someone authorize a change?" The question made my stomach clench. "Claire's been handling that," I admitted. "She said it was all approved." Patel hesitated, eyes narrowing. "I'd suggest you verify. Sometimes cheaper generics get substituted, but if he's not responding well, that could be dangerous." I nodded, but my throat was tight. Dangerous. The word followed me home like a shadow. That night, I went into Dad's study while Claire was in the kitchen. It was still the same room I'd grown up sneaking into, where Dad had kept every paper stacked with precision. But now something was wrong. The drawer where his will had always been, gone. The folder that held the house deed, the trust account, and the pension paperwork, all missing. I stood frozen, my hands trembling against the wood of the desk. "Looking for something?" Claire's voice slipped in like silk. I spun around. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, face unreadable. "Where are his documents?" My voice cracked more than I wanted. "I filed them," she said smoothly. "They weren't safe lying around. Your father's been confused lately. He could have misplaced or damaged them." "Filed them where?" She smiled faintly. "In a safer place. You don't need to worry about it, Michael. I'm handling things. That's what families do." Families. The word stung. That night I couldn't sleep. I tossed, turned, stared at the ceiling. Every creak of the house felt like a warning I couldn't quite decipher. Sometime past midnight, I padded downstairs for water. That's when I heard it. Claire's voice, low but urgent, carrying from the patio. I inched closer, careful not to be seen. Through the glass, I caught her silhouette in the dark. Phone pressed to her ear. Yes, Jason. It's nearly done. Caretaker rights are just about secured. Timing has to be perfect. A pause. Don't worry. He trusts me. Michael too. He thinks I'm saving them both. My blood ran cold. Jason, her brother. Why was she talking to him about rights, timing? And why did it sound like she was orchestrating a takeover, not caregiving? I must have made a sound, because she turned suddenly, phone dropping to her side. Michael? What are you doing up? My voice cracked with fury. Who were you talking to? No one important. My brother. He worries, you know that. I heard you. Caretaker rights? Timing? What the hell does that mean? Her eyes flashed, then softened. Her tone slipping into that patronizing calm she always used when she wanted me quiet. Michael, you're exhausted. You're not hearing things right. You've been so emotional lately you can't think straight. Do you really want to make something out of nothing? I wanted to scream, to shake the truth out of her. But she kept pressing. Hand on my arm, eyes searching mine like I was the one who'd lost grip on reality. You're paranoid, she whispered. You need to trust me, for your father's sake. For us. The gaslight burned hotter than fire. For a moment I wavered. Maybe I was imagining connections that weren't there. Maybe Patel was being cautious, not suspicious. Maybe Claire really had just filed things away safely. But then, from the top of the stairs, I heard a rasp. Don't let her finish what she started. Richard stood there, one hand on the banister, pale as the moonlight behind him. His eyes, though tired, were fierce. The old Richard glinting through the fog. His words cut sharper than any knife. Claire's face didn't flicker. She smiled up at him, sweet as poison. Richard, you should be in bed. Don't strain yourself. But he didn't look at her. His eyes stayed locked on mine. Pleading. Warning. For the first time, doubt wasn't just a whisper in my head. It was my father's voice, raw and desperate, begging me not to ignore what he already knew. And suddenly, you'll regret it if you stay with her, wasn't just a father's stubborn warning. It was a prophecy. Richard's words clung to me like barbed wire. Don't let her finish what she started. I couldn't shake them, no matter how much Claire tried to smooth things over with her calm smiles and careful explanations. Every time I looked at Dad, thinner and weaker, I wondered if this was what she meant by helping. I decided to stop taking her words at face value. I needed to see for myself. One afternoon, when Claire left for an errand, I slipped into her home office. She always kept her laptop with her, but the old file cabinet in the corner was less guarded. My heart pounded as I rifled through folders labeled medical, utilities, household. For a while, it was just normal paperwork, rent receipts, grocery lists, doctor appointment reminders. Then I found it. A folder labeled Richard. Inside were half-finished forms, some typed, some scrawled by hand. At first glance, they looked like legal caregiver documents, power of attorney, medical proxy, property authorization. But the signatures, they were wrong. Too perfect. My father's name was written with smooth strokes, but without the slight hesitation of his real hand. I'd grown up watching Dad sign checks, school slips, and loan papers. His signature was firm but uneven, pressed harder at the start of his R. These ones looked traced, practiced. My stomach dropped. She was preparing a takeover. Before I could dig further, I heard the crunch of tires in the driveway. Panic surged through me. I shoved the documents back, forced the drawer closed, and barely made it into the hallway before Claire walked in, grocery bags in hand. Michael? You home early? Her eyes searched me, suspicious. Yeah. Work was slow. I lied, throat dry. Thought I'd check on Dad. She gave me that lingering look, the kind that made me feel like a child caught sneaking cookies, before setting her bags down. Good. He needs calm energy, not stress. That night, I called Dr. Patel. My voice was low, urgent. I need to know about the medication switch. You said it didn't match his history. What did you mean? Patel hesitated, then sighed. Your father was on a stable regimen for years, brand-name prescriptions, no issues. What he's receiving now are cheaper generics. Not inherently harmful, but with his condition, the reduced effectiveness explains his sudden decline. Someone requested the change. My chest tightened. Could Claire have done that? I can't speculate, but I suggest you ask the pharmacy that authorized it. The pieces started to connect, her filing the documents, her insistence on controlling his care, the whispers about caretaker rights. She wasn't helping. She was dismantling him piece by piece. I thought Sarah would understand. She'd always been protective of Dad, too. The sibling I could count on when things got tense. So I called her, laid it all out. The forged papers, the meds, Claire's phone call to Jason. But Sarah's voice was cool, distant. Michael, I don't know if I can trust what you're saying. Claire's been honest with me. She told me you've been under a lot of stress, that you've been controlling, paranoid. She said you're making this harder for everyone. I gripped the phone until my knuckles whitened. Sarah, listen to yourself. That's exactly what she wants you to think. She's isolating us, turning us against each other. Or maybe you're turning against her because you can't handle someone else being in control. She snapped back. I've seen how you talk to her sometimes. You need help, Michael. The line went dead, and with it, a piece of my resolve cracked. The next day, I got my answer about the pharmacy. Claire had authorized the switch on behalf of the family. She hadn't even asked. I walked out into the parking lot, shaking, when a figure stepped into my path. Jason. He was broader than me, cocky grin plastered across his face like this was all a game. You really don't know when to quit, do you? He said. I clenched my fists. Stay out of this. Oh, I'm very much in this. You think you can undo what Claire's built? She's protecting her future. Our future. You get in the way, you'll regret it. His voice dropped lower, almost taunting. Think about it, your job, your reputation, your little safety net. All of it can go away if you push too hard. It wasn't just a warning. It was a threat. For a moment, I imagined swinging at him, breaking that smug grin. But instead, I stepped back, forcing my voice steady. Tell Claire I'm not backing off. Not this time. His grin faltered, just slightly. When I got home that night, I found Claire in the living room, papers spread across the coffee table. She looked up, smiled faintly, and patted the cushion beside her. Come sit. We need to talk about your father's long-term care. I sat, but inside I was boiling. Every word out of her mouth was another trap. Gentle tones, promises of safety, reminders that she was keeping us together. But behind it all, I saw the truth. This wasn't just about emotions. It was about money, power, control. She wasn't satisfied with being my partner. She wanted to own everything, even my father's life. And as much as it terrified me, part of me finally understood Dad's warning. You'll regret it if you stay with her. The regret had already started. But now it was war. The folder felt heavier than it should have. Inside it, I had gathered every scrap of evidence I could claw together. The forged caretaker documents with Dad's shaky, falsified signature. The pharmacy receipts showing who had authorized the switch in medication. Dr. Patel's quiet but damning written statement. It wasn't airtight, but it was enough to draw blood. If I were wrong, I'd look paranoid. If I were right, I could end Claire. That morning, I told Dad my plan. He was sitting in the recliner, thinner than I'd ever seen him, his hands trembling as he tried to sip his coffee. But his eyes, those hadn't faded. They burned with a sharpness that told me he was still here, still fighting under the weight she'd put on him. I need you with me, Dad, I said. His lips twitched into a tired smile. Thought you'd never ask. We set the meeting with Mr. Klein, the family lawyer who'd handled Dad's estate for over a decade. If anyone knew Dad's signature, his habits, his intentions, it was him. Claire didn't know about the meeting until the morning of. I told her over breakfast, watching her stir her tea. I've asked Mr. Klein to review some of Dad's documents, I said casually. Her spoon clinked against the cup. Oh? Why would you bother him with that? I've already organized everything. I'd like him to double-check. For Dad's peace of mind. Her smile was polite, but her jaw tightened. Fine. If it'll shut you up. Jason showed up, too, because of course he did. Hovering by her side like a bodyguard. Smirking at me whenever Claire wasn't looking. Mr. Klein's office smelled like leather and old books. the walls lined with degrees and framed newspaper clippings. The man himself looked older than I remembered, but still sharp, his glasses perched low on his nose. He greeted us warmly, his eyes softening when they fell on Dad. "Richard," he said, shaking his hand gently. "You look tired, my friend." Dad chuckled weakly. "I'd look better if people stopped poisoning me." Claire let out a horrified gasp, her hand flying to her chest. "Richard, that's... Michael's been feeding you these ideas, hasn't he? He's always been so suspicious, so dramatic." "Let's sit," Klein interrupted, motioning us to the table. I laid out the folder and slid it across the polished wood surface. "Mr. Klein, I'd like you to look at these." He opened the folder, adjusted his glasses, and began to read. The room was silent except for the shuffle of papers. My palms were sweating, heart hammering, as I watched him study the forged documents. Finally, he looked up. "Richard, did you sign these?" Dad leaned forward, his voice gravelly but steady. "No. I've signed hundreds of things with you, Harold. You know how I write my name. That's not mine." Claire shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "This is unbelievable. Michael is trying to destroy me because he can't stand that I care more about his father's well-being than he does. He's paranoid, Harold. I've been the one at every appointment, every pharmacy pickup. He barely shows up, and when he does, he picks fights." "Is that true?" Mr. Klein asked, glancing at me. I leaned forward, voice low but fierce. "I have the pharmacy records. Every single medication change was signed off by Claire. Not Dad. Not Dr. Patel. Claire. And here, I pulled another sheet from the folder. This is Dr. Patel's written statement. He confirmed the switch from stable brand name meds to cheap generics that caused Dad's decline. He even warned me someone requested it." Claire's tears dried fast. Her face hardened. "He's twisting this. He always twists things. Richard, tell them how controlling he's been. He questions every move I make. He wants your estate, your money, your—" "Enough," Dad said, louder than I'd heard him in months. His voice cracked, but it cut through her words like glass. "Claire, you've been circling me like a vulture since the day Michael brought you home. I thought maybe I was being paranoid, maybe I was just an old man set in his ways. But now I see it plain. You don't love my son. You love control. You love power. And you thought I was too weak to notice." Her face drained of color. Jason shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "You don't understand," Claire snapped, her tone sharp now, venom leaking through the cracks in her performance. "You'd already lost control, Richard. Somebody had to step in. Michael's too naive, Sarah doesn't care, and you were slipping. If I hadn't taken over, everything you built would have crumbled." "Funny," Mr. Klein said, leaning back. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you were preparing to make sure everything Richard built ended up in your hands." He tapped the forged documents. "And Jason's." Jason shot up from his chair. "I'm not. This isn't—" he stammered, eyes darting toward the door. "Sit down," Claire hissed at him, but it was too late. His flight reflex had already betrayed them both. "Harold, please," Claire begged, her voice breaking again as she reached across the table toward Mr. Klein. "You know me. You know I wouldn't hurt Richard. Michael's manipulating you, just like he manipulates everyone." "That's enough," Klein said, pushing her hand away. "I've known Richard longer than you've been alive. I know his signature, and I know when someone's trying to play me." The silence that followed was suffocating. Claire sat there, her mask shattered, her breathing uneven. Jason muttered something under his breath and bolted for the door. I sat back, adrenaline coursing through me, and looked at her one last time. "You lost, Claire. It's over." She stared at me, lips curled in a snarl, eyes burning with hatred. "You think this is the end? You'll regret this, Michael. Both of you will." But the words were hollow now. For the first time, she had no ground left to stand on. Dad leaned back, exhausted but smiling faintly. "Told you," he murmured. "You'd regret staying with her." And in that moment, regret was the last thing I felt. The silence after Claire's final outburst lingered like smoke. Jason was gone, and Claire sat frozen, her facade shattered in front of the one person she hadn't been able to manipulate, Dad. Mr. Klein slid the forged documents back into the folder, his expression steeled. "These will not stand," he said flatly. "Richard, you're still of sound mind. I'll ensure every fraudulent paper is shredded in court. And as for you, Claire," his gaze pinned her like a nail, "I'd suggest you prepare for the consequences of forgery and fraud." Claire's jaw tightened, but she didn't speak. She just sat there, breathing shallowly, the image of defeat. The legal gears started moving quickly after that. Mr. Klein wasted no time filing motions to invalidate the fraudulent caretaker rights and revoke Claire's access to anything connected to Dad's finances. Every call, every document she'd filed was now under review. Her phone buzzed constantly for days, but she stopped answering once it became clear the calls weren't allies. They were investigators, colleagues, and creditors circling like vultures. Within 2 weeks, she lost her job. Word spread fast in her field. No one wanted to touch a woman accused of trying to bleed her partner's father dry. Jason, meanwhile, evaporated. Rumor had it he'd fled the state the moment investigators started asking about his consulting business. No trail, no explanation, just gone. For once, their scheming bought them nothing but isolation. The best part came quietly: Dad's recovery. Once Dr. Patel reinstated his proper prescriptions, it was like watching fog lift from his mind. The tremors eased, his voice grew steadier, and the sharp humor that had always defined him began to flicker back. He wasn't the same man overnight, but every week he gained strength. One afternoon, a month after Claire's exposure, I walked into the living room and found him sitting upright, reading the newspaper with a pen tucked behind his ear. It stopped me in my tracks. He glanced up. "What? Haven't seen a man read before?" I laughed, though my throat tightened. For weeks, I'd been bracing for decline, for loss. Seeing him alive, recovering, it felt like winning the only battle that mattered. Sarah came around, too. At first, she avoided me, embarrassed by how easily she'd bought into Claire's narrative of me being unstable and controlling. But eventually, she showed up at Dad's place, clutching a pie from the store like it was a peace offering. "I was wrong," she admitted quietly, unable to meet my eyes. "She made me believe things about you that weren't true. I should have trusted you. I didn't make it easy. You should have trusted Dad, too." Her face crumpled, but she nodded. "I know." Dad cut in from his recliner, voice softer than usual. "What matters is you're here now. Families fight. Families forgive." He looked between us until I sighed and accepted the truce. Because he was right. Claire wanted us to be divided. The best revenge was pulling back together. Claire tried once more to spin the story, this time to anyone who would listen online. Posts, messages, and even a video claiming she was the real victim of an abusive partner and his manipulative father. But without evidence, without Jason backing her, her words fell flat. People who once called her a friend distanced themselves. Colleagues blocked her. Every time she screamed into the void answered back with silence. She'd wanted power. Now she had none. The real victory wasn't in watching her fall. It was in watching Dad rise again. One evening, as we sat on the porch with the sun setting, he looked at me, his eyes clearer than they'd been in months. "You finally listened," he said simply. I thought back to that first warning, the night I laughed in his face when he told me, "You'll regret it if you stay with her." He'd been right, but sitting there with him alive, recovering, and our family healing, I realized regret had no place left in me, because survival itself had become the revenge. Hey, what would you have done if your partner tried to take over your parents' life piece by piece? Should Michael have listened to his dad from the start, or was it better that he waited until he had proof? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you want more betrayal thrillers like this, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one.